I stood outside the conference room holding the binder I had worked on for 6 months when I heard my mother's voice through the cracked door. She was talking about me, and every word felt like a knife. "She's not ready, Warren." Avery panics. She gets emotional. "You put her in charge, and this whole merger collapses." My stomach dropped. The woman who raised me was actively destroying my career. I gripped the binder tighter, my knuckles turning white. Part of me wanted to walk away, but something stronger pushed me forward. I stepped inside just as she smiled smugly at the CEO, only for that smile to evaporate when Warren looked directly at me and said, "Funny, Marlene, because I've just decided Avery will lead the merger." Her face fell. Her mouth opened but nothing came out. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. She blinked rapidly, trying to recover her composure, but the damage was done. Everyone in the room had seen her shock, her horror at my success. My name is Avery Holt, and that moment broke something inside me. Not my spirit, but the last thread of hope that my mother could ever celebrate my victories instead of sabotaging them. Growing up, I thought every mother treated her daughter like a competitor. It seemed normal that praise only came when I achieved something she had already accomplished. Anything beyond her own success was met with warnings about getting too confident or reaching too high. Her favorite line was, "Don't get ahead of yourself, Avery." She said it when I made honor roll. She said it when I got accepted to a top university. She said it when I landed my first corporate job at the same company where she had worked for 15 years. I didn't realize she meant it literally until much later. She didn't want me to get ahead of her, period. In her mind, there was only room for one successful woman in our family, and she had already claimed that position. My childhood was filled with subtle put-downs disguised as motherly concern. When I brought home good grades, she would mention the student who scored higher. When I excelled at piano, she reminded me I would never be professional. Nothing I did was ever quite good enough, and I spent years trying to understand why. The truth was simple but devastating. She saw me as a threat, not a daughter. When the merger leadership role opened at our company, I knew I was qualified. I had spent 3 years building relationships with the acquisition target, understanding their systems, and preparing integration strategies. My analysis was sharper than anyone else's on the team. But when I mentioned applying, my mother's reaction told me everything. Fear flashed across her face before she masked it with concern. "You'll humiliate yourself," she said over dinner at her house. "This merger is enormous. Let someone more seasoned try. Someone with experience handling pressure." She meant someone like her. But she wasn't qualified for this role. Her expertise was in operations, not strategic acquisitions. She knew it, and worse, she knew I knew it. "I've been preparing for this," I replied calmly. "I understand their infrastructure better than anyone." Her smile turned tight. "Confidence is good, sweetheart. Overconfidence is dangerous." That conversation should have been a warning. Instead, I focused on my application, refining my proposal, and gathering supporting data. I was so focused on proving myself to the CEO that I didn't see what my own mother was planning behind my back. The first sign came 2 weeks later. I had prepared a comprehensive client report for the board review, documenting potential merger challenges and solutions. It was my best work, detailed and thorough. The morning of the presentation, I opened the shared drive to do a final review. The file was gone. Completely deleted. My hands shook as I searched through folders, checked version history, and scanned my email for backups. My mother appeared at my desk. "Everything okay?" "My report disappeared," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The board review is in an hour." She shrugged, her face perfectly neutral. "You must have misplaced it. Did you check your local files?" I found it later that afternoon, buried in the recycle bin on her desktop. Not deleted permanently, just hidden enough to cause panic. She didn't even bother to cover her tracks properly, which made it worse. She wanted me to know, but couldn't prove it. When I confronted her, she acted confused. How would it get there? Must be a system glitch. But her eyes told a different story. This was deliberate. A week after the missing report incident, my manager pulled me aside for what he called a casual check-in. His expression was concerned, almost pitying. Your mother mentioned you're feeling overwhelmed, he said gently. She's worried about your workload. Should we redistribute some of your projects? I felt my face flush, but I kept my voice calm. I'm managing everything fine. What specifically did she say concerned her? He hesitated. Just that you seem stressed. She knows you well, so I thought I should ask. She was building a narrative. A false one. Planting seeds of doubt about my competence with people who controlled my career advancement. This wasn't accidental interference anymore. This was strategic sabotage. I smiled politely and assured him I was handling everything. But inside, something shifted. I couldn't keep defending myself against invisible attacks. I needed to change my strategy. That night, I started documenting everything. Every email, every conversation, every project file. I created backup systems and paper trails. If she wanted a quiet war, I would fight one. Professionally. Silently. And I would win. My first strategic move was simple but effective. I began copying Warren, the CEO, on all major project updates. Not obviously, just routine professional communication. It created a record he could access if questions arose about my work. I also started scheduling regular check-ins with department heads, building relationships my mother assumed belonged only to her. She had spent 15 years cultivating influence, but I had something she lacked, fresh ideas and genuine collaboration skills. People responded well. They appreciated my thorough analysis and willingness to listen. Slowly, I was building my own foundation of support, independent of her shadow. I kept my strategy invisible. When she asked about my increased meetings, I called them learning opportunities. When she noticed my expanding network, I credited her example. I gave her no reason to escalate while I quietly fortified my position. At home, I maintained a separate work laptop with encrypted files. Everything important had multiple backups. I learned from her first attack and made sure she could never delete my work again. The war continued, but now I was fighting back. 3 weeks later, she made a critical mistake. An email meant for HR appeared in my inbox instead. She had clicked the wrong recipient. The message read, "Avery's performance is slipping. I'm genuinely concerned she's damaging team morale. As her mother, I feel obligated to speak up before this becomes a larger problem." My chest tightened. She was escalating, using her role as my mother to make her sabotage seem like loving concern. Who would question a mother worried about her daughter? Within minutes, she sent a follow-up, "Please disregard previous email. Wrong recipient. My apologies." I didn't respond. I just saved both messages, added them to my growing evidence folder, and continued working. She was building a case against me, but unknowingly, she was also building my defense. Later that day, she stopped by my desk. Silly me, sent an email to the wrong person earlier. These things happen, I replied neutrally. Her eyes searched my face for reaction. I gave her nothing. Let her wonder. The family dinner happened on a Sunday, carefully orchestrated by my mother. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone gathered at her house. She played the perfect hostess, warm and concerned. Halfway through the meal, she brought up my career. "I'm worried about Avery," she announced to the table. "She's working too much. The stress is making her irrational." Heads turned toward me. Sympathetic expressions bloomed around the table. "Work-life balance is so important," my aunt said, patting my hand. "Maybe you should take some time off," another relative suggested. I sat quietly, realizing how long she had been preparing this campaign. She wasn't just sabotaging me at work. She was destroying my credibility everywhere, even among family who had known me since birth. "I'm fine," I said simply. "I love my work." My mother sighed dramatically. "That's exactly what concerns me. You're so invested, you can't see the toll it's taking." I didn't argue. Arguing would prove her point. Instead, I smiled and changed the subject. But I noted every word, every manipulation, filing it away in my memory. 2 months into my merger proposal preparation, a vendor called with an urgent question. Why had I approved a budget that exceeded our discussed parameters? The numbers made no sense for the project scope. "I didn't approve this," I told him, confused. "But your signature is right here on the approval form," he insisted. He emailed me a copy. There it was, my signature, perfectly forged. The handwriting matched mine exactly, down to the slight curve of the ivory. Only one person had regular access to my desk. Only one person had studied my signature enough to replicate it. My hand shook, but not with fear. With clarity. I contacted our contracts department and explained the situation. They launched a quiet investigation. I provided handwriting samples and pointed out the approval process I always followed, which hadn't been used in this case. The investigation cleared me of wrongdoing, but couldn't definitively prove who forged the signature. My mother, when questioned, seemed genuinely confused and concerned. She played her part perfectly. But I knew. And now, so did contracts department. After the forged approval incident, Warren started paying closer attention. I noticed him observing interactions, asking pointed questions, watching how departments functioned. He called me into his office privately one afternoon. "Avery, do you feel supported by your team?" The question was careful, open-ended. I could sense he already suspected something but needed confirmation. For the first time, I didn't cover for her. I didn't make excuses or downplay concerns. I simply said, "Not always." His eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "Elaborate." "Sometimes information doesn't reach me when it should. Projects I'm working on get questioned before I can present them. Small things that add up." He nodded slowly. "I see." Something told me he already suspected who the problem was. He just needed to hear it from someone directly affected. "Thank you for your honesty," he said. "Keep doing the excellent work you're doing." After I left his office, I felt lighter. The truth was finally reaching the right people. The major department meeting happened on a Thursday. I was presenting preliminary merger findings when my mother interrupted from across the conference table. "That strategy was actually my idea," she said smoothly. "Avery just executed it. I'm glad to see my framework is working well." Several people glanced at each other. Some looked uncomfortable. Others seemed unsure who to believe. I didn't correct her publicly. Creating a scene would only make me look defensive and unprofessional. Instead, I simply continued my presentation, noting every word she said. Later, I added the meeting transcript to my evidence folder. Her pattern was becoming undeniable. She claimed credit for my successes while simultaneously telling people I was failing. After the meeting, Warren's assistant scheduled another private conversation with me. The message simply read, "Warren would like to discuss your merger strategy in detail. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. He wanted my version. Unfiltered. And I would give it to him. She cornered me in the parking garage after work one evening. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as she stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. "You think you're better than me," she hissed, her finger jabbing the air between us. "You walk around this office like you've already won. But you're not better. You never will be." I stood completely still, my car keys gripping in my hand. This was the first time she had dropped the concerned mother act entirely. "I'm not trying to compete with you," I said quietly. "Everything is competition," she snapped. "And I've been playing this game longer than you've been alive." The mask had finally slipped. This wasn't about concern for my well-being or worry about my career. This was about her need to be the center of attention, the most successful woman in every room. That was the moment I stopped seeking a mother and started protecting myself from a rival. The relationship I had hoped for didn't exist. It never had. "I need to go," I said calmly, walking past her to my car. She stood there, breathing hard, watching me leave. The secret recording happened by accident, but I kept it. I was working late in a small conference room when I heard voices in the adjacent room. The walls were thin, and the ventilation system carried sound clearly. My mother was talking to James, a department head. "I'm telling you this in confidence, but Avery is emotionally unstable. I've seen her crying at work. She's alienating coworkers with her intensity." All lies. Every single word. I pulled out my phone and started recording. The audio was clean, clear. She continued for several minutes, painting a picture of me as someone barely holding things together. When she finished, James sounded uncomfortable. "Have you talked to HR?" "I'm trying to handle it privately," she replied. "She's my daughter. I don't want to damage her career." I sat there, listening to her destroy me while pretending to protect me. The recording lasted 7 minutes. I didn't show it to anyone yet, but I saved it carefully. Evidence was power. I was learning her game and playing it better. I scheduled a performance check-in with our COO, Sandra, using the standard review process. Nothing unusual, just routine professional development. Sandra reviewed my merger analysis and recent project outcomes. Her expression grew increasingly impressed as she examined my work. "Your analytics are sharper than half the leadership team," she said finally. "Including some people who've been here much longer. Including my mother." She didn't say it directly, but we both knew. "I enjoy the strategic planning aspect," I replied. "Understanding systems and how they connect." Sandra nodded. "Warren's noticed your work. Keep it up." That conversation opened a new door. Sandra became a mentor, someone who evaluated my performance based on actual results rather than someone else's narrative. I started getting invited to higher-level strategy meetings. Not because of my mother's influence, but despite it. My work was finally speaking for itself. My mother noticed the shift. I could see it in how she watched me during company events, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes anymore. As the merger deadline approached, her sabotage intensified. Critical documents mysteriously didn't get forwarded to me. Meeting updates vanished from my calendar. Conference calls got scheduled during times she knew I was out with clients. She wanted me to fail publicly. To miss the deadline and prove all her warnings correct. But I had learned to anticipate her moves. I had backup systems, multiple communication channels, and relationships with people who kept me informed. Every obstacle she created, I worked around. The night before the deadline, I worked until 3 a.m, triple-checking every number, every analysis, every recommendation. When I submitted my final merger proposal, it was early and thoroughly documented. Warren's response came within an hour: "Exceptional work, Avery." This exceeded my expectations. I saved that email. Added it to the growing folder of evidence that contradicted everything my mother had been saying about me. She had tried to bury me, but instead, she had pushed me to become better than I ever thought possible. Warren decided to test us both. He assigned a small pre-merger task, requiring Marlene and me to collaborate. On paper, it seemed like a good idea. In reality, it was a trap, for her. She immediately tried to exclude me from key decisions. She scheduled meetings without telling me, then claimed I wasn't interested in participating. She altered our shared documents to make my contributions look minimal. But I documented everything. Every changed document had a version history. Every missed meeting had a paper trail showing I was never invited. When Warren asked why our numbers didn't match the initial parameters, I forwarded him the receipts. Time-stamped evidence of every change, every exclusion, every manipulation. His reply was brief but meaningful: "Thank you, Avery." This helps. She had failed his test. She probably didn't even realize it was a test, too focused on beating me to see the bigger picture. Warren was methodical, strategic. He wouldn't act rashly, but he was gathering his own evidence now. I didn't file the HR complaint. Someone else did. Apparently, I wasn't the only person who had noticed my mother's behavior. Several coworkers had witnessed her sabotage, her credit stealing, her manipulation. They filed a collective complaint about workplace toxicity. HR called me in for a statement. We're investigating concerns about Marlene Holt's conduct. Several employees have reported issues. We need to understand the full scope. For the first time, she was losing control of the narrative. Other people were seeing what I had experienced for months. The mask was cracking. I provided my statement factually, without emotional embellishment. I showed my documentation, explained the pattern of sabotage, and let the evidence speak. The HR representative took detailed notes. This is very helpful. We take these matters seriously. When I left that meeting, I felt something unexpected, validation. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overly sensitive. Other people had seen it too. My mother's carefully constructed image was finally crumbling. I poured everything into my final merger presentation. While she bragged to others about guiding my development, I worked late into every night, refining analyses, preparing for every possible question, building the strongest case I could. My revenge wasn't destroying her. It was outgrowing her. Becoming so undeniably competent that her lies couldn't touch me. I practiced my presentation dozens of times. I knew every data point, every projected outcome, every risk factor. I prepared backup plans for scenarios that would probably never happen. The presentation wasn't just about the merger anymore. It was about proving that I belonged in that room, at that level, regardless of who tried to hold me back. On the final practice run, I stood in my empty apartment and delivered the entire presentation to my reflection. Calm, confident, thoroughly prepared. I was ready. Not just for the presentation, but for whatever came after. The night before the big presentation, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. She looked agitated, pacing in my small living room. "You're going to embarrass yourself tomorrow," she said, her voice sharp with something that sounded like fear. "This merger is beyond your experience level. You should withdraw and recommend someone else." I looked at her carefully. Really looked. The woman before me wasn't concerned. She was terrified. "Why does my success threaten you so much?" I asked quietly. She stopped pacing. "I'm trying to protect you." "No. You're trying to protect yourself. From being overshadowed." Her face flushed. "I've worked at this company for 15 years. I've earned my reputation. I won't let you damage it." "I'm not trying to damage anything. I'm just trying to do good work." When she left, I didn't cry. I smiled. She couldn't sense it, but I could. Her fear. She knew I was ready. She knew she was losing. I arrived early the next morning, going over my notes one final time. The boardroom was empty, quiet. I arranged my materials carefully, making sure everything was perfect. That's when I heard voices through the partially open door. My mother was already there, talking to Warren. "She's not ready," I heard her say. "Avery panics under pressure. She gets emotional. You put her in charge of this merger, and the whole thing collapses." I stood frozen, my hand on the door handle. After everything, she was still trying to sabotage me. Even now, at the final moment. I pulled out my phone and pressed record. Not to use against her necessarily, but to have proof. To know I wasn't imagining this. She continued, her voice growing more desperate. "I'm telling you this as someone who's known her entire life. She can't handle this level of responsibility." I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and pushed the door open. Time to end this. The room fell silent as I entered. My mother's face went pale, then flushed red. She clearly hadn't expected me to arrive early. Warren looked at me, then back at her, his expression unreadable. "Avery," he said calmly. "Perfect timing. We were just discussing the merger leadership." I met his eyes steadily. "I'm ready to present my proposal." He nodded. "Actually, I've made a decision." He paused, looking directly at my mother. "Funny, Marlene, because I've just decided Avery will lead the merger." My mother's face fell. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked between Warren and me, shock and horror battling on her face. "But, she can't," she finally stammered. Warren cut her off. "And Marlene, we need to talk about your conduct. Separately." The color drained from her face completely. She stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. Other executives filed into the room for my presentation. I took my place at the front, opened my laptop, and began presenting the work I had spent 6 months perfecting. HR moved swiftly after Warren's decision. My mother wasn't fired. The company didn't want the liability or drama of terminating a long-term employee without exhaustive process. Instead, she was reassigned to a non-strategic position. A quiet department far from leadership decisions. No direct reports. No influence over major projects. Exactly where she had tried to bury me. The official explanation was organizational restructuring. Everyone knew the truth, though. Her behavior had finally caught up with her. She cleaned out her corner office the following week. I saw her carrying boxes to her new workspace, a small cubicle in a forgotten hallway. She didn't look at me as we passed in the corridor. I felt no triumph. Just exhaustion and a strange sense of loss. Not for her, but for the relationship that could have been. If she had supported me instead of competing with me, we could have both succeeded. But she had made her choices, and now she lived with the consequences. Privately, I met with Warren one final time. I brought my complete evidence folder, emails, recordings, documents, witness statements. Everything I had gathered over months of careful documentation. "I'm not sharing this out of spite," I said carefully. "But for the company's protection. You should know the full scope." He reviewed the materials thoroughly, his expression growing more serious with each page. When he finished, he looked up at me. "This confirms everything," he said. "The HR investigation found similar patterns. Your documentation is meticulous." "I learned to protect myself," I replied. He nodded slowly. "You handled this with remarkable professionalism. Many people would have retaliated publicly or emotionally. You documented, prepared, and let your work speak. My work was the only weapon I needed." His respect was palpable. He saw not just an employee, but a leader. Someone who faced adversity and emerged stronger. "Thank you, Avery," he said. "For your integrity." She cornered me one last time in the building lobby. Her eyes were wild, desperate. The polished professional facade had completely shattered. "I'm your mother," she whispered harshly, gripping my arm. "You owe me respect. After everything I've done for you." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "Respect goes both ways." "I raised you," she hissed. "I sacrificed for you. You competed with me. There's a difference." She froze, no script left to manipulate. For the first time in my life, I saw her clearly. Not as a powerful figure to fear, but as a deeply insecure person who couldn't celebrate anyone else's success. "I hope you find peace," I said quietly. And I meant it. I walked away, leaving her standing alone in the lobby. I didn't look back. That chapter was closed. Leading the merger became my career breakthrough. The project succeeded beyond projections, opening new markets and creating hundreds of jobs. I earned my own office, my own team, my own voice. Warren promoted me to senior leadership within a year. I mentored younger employees, especially women who felt overshadowed or underestimated. I built the supportive environment I had wished for. My mother avoided me at work. Her influence had dissolved, her power evaporated. Sometimes I saw her in the cafeteria or elevator, and we exchanged polite nods. Nothing more. Strangely, I felt free. The constant competition, the endless need to prove myself worthy of love, it was over. I had learned that some relationships are toxic even when they're supposed to be sacred. My revenge wasn't humiliating her or destroying her career. It was living a life she could no longer control. Success, peace, independence, that was the win she never saw coming. I had wanted a mother. Instead, I got a rival. But in fighting her, I discovered my own strength. And that, ultimately, was the greatest gift she could have given me, even if she never meant to.